Hi, video watchers. I'm Elena. This is Sean, and he and I have actually never met. But he was asking me some really great questions in a Twitter thread about my transition from academic math, physics, machine learning engineering. There was like theoretical quantum computing in there too. You name it, I have been all over the quantitative space. But now I'm a body worker and somatic-emotional holistic health practitioner. Based in Berkeley. You can book sessions with me. I'll put a link in the description below. But a lot of what I do is also simply exploration and sense making on Twitter. So I'll link my Twitter there too. But yeah, Sean was asking me questions in a thread about like what going from A to B was like for me. And as soon as I read them, I was like, dude, you're totally not the only one that wants to hear this. I've been wanting to story tell more about it for a while. It's more fun to chat. What do you say that we just hop on a call and talk about it and record it? So here we both are, and we're just here to chat. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, from A to B, it feels like a almost a non sequitur. There must have been some like first moment when you had doubts about your worldview as a like very quantitative person or something, right?
Hmm. Yeah. First moment. The well, what actually happened I faced problems that my worldview was not the most effective tool for resolving. Like it was just so clear. I was at MIT actually, which is funny because I'm visiting a friend who's a grad student there now. I'm
Mm.
like in Cambridge. I was learning all this math and physics, but then like my friends were depressed. I'm like, this seems like a problem. This seems important. Why am I doing this and not like resolving that? And there were even like people around me that were like going to the psych ward. Like it was a little scary. So it's not that I ever like stopped liking the quantitative. I still find it fun,
Mm.
but more like, hey, there's like more important stuff like literally in my sphere. Like I don't actually care about quantum computing. I want to have a nice life.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So you first were encountering like mental health issues yourself or your friends were, or
Hmm.
is that fair to say?
Um, Yeah, so what happened? There were kind of two branches of this. Like I squeaked through school, and now I recognize I had like pretty serious like my life could have felt a lot better than it did. I was like in emotional pain, but I was still like keeping things together.
Right.
But like around me, people were like having breakdowns and going to psych wards, and I'm like, this isn't,
You saw the writing on the wall.
this seems bad.
Yeah.
I also looked at my professors and was like, I don't really want any of your guys' lives. Like, where are the happy people? So I kept my eyes open for like, wait, like these people van lifing around and like going to festivals. Basically, I just looked for where are the happiest people. And so festivals was like the first iteration of that, but that only gets you to a certain level of maturity. Now I'm like, herbalists seem like as a demographic incredibly well adjusted and like they're like internally glowing and like show up for their families. Like,
Yeah.
where are the people whose lives I want?
Did you see herbalists at festivals? Like what was the kind of like causal
Mm.
chain?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, well, I want to answer. Yeah, I did. I had pretty serious social emotional difficulties that I only have the vocabulary for now because at the time I was just like, I don't know,
Right.
maybe life is pain. Like, but
Yeah.
I'm so good at just like desperately holding things together to get things done. But my friends were not like that. And I'm like, well, this is also sad. So I kind of started caring for other people first, and then realized, like, wait a
Ah,
second. oh, if I don't resolve this, there will come a time at which I can't hold it together anymore. I like see the way it's tracking.
Right.
So I learned how to make my life feel good, and now I feel better.
Yeah. So like I guess like my curiosity comes from uh having a number of friends in the like quantitative space who maybe they're like emotional curious, but they're not really um red pilled or whatever color this should be pilled on like paying attention to emotions and acknowledging them. Um never mind like broader mental health stuff.
Mhm.
Um I'm curious like if you had I guess you saw people in pain and then you figured out how to heal it. Like what was what's in between there? Like how did you get the tools for that? How did you what was the first thing you like looked at that where you first caught some like traction in this other way of being or thinking?
Yeah, and this is an interesting part of my own arc and where I'm curious to compare contrast like what I went through versus like what's going on in the collective. Because like why I started paying attention to emotions is maybe different from like people who have a relatively comfortable life, but are like there's like a subtle meaninglessness like catching up to them. Like I had PTSD is another way to put it. Like various childhood stuff that I'm like, oh, that was emotional neglect. Like it wasn't trending a good direction, but there were like clear. Now I'm like in such a better place, but at the time it just felt like an amorphous, like black pit of despair that I tried to like pretend wasn't there. Um, so there was a, and I don't know what that would be like for somebody that didn't have that like early, like I didn't have PTSD growing up, but then I was on a foundation that left me emotionally unprotected for like a situation that did give me PTSD. I just didn't have the emotional discernment or wherewithal to like stay in healthy relationships and not get tangled in like a bad thing.
Right.
Got PTSD from the bad thing. Felt absolutely terrible. PTSD is bad. Uh, I was kind of a wreck. Still managing to like do good quantitative work though, but like clearly was trending downwards on a soul level, even if my work was still good quality. Started compulsively reading every single emotional health book I could get my hands on, was still like kind of ashamed about like this caring about emotions thing.
Right.
Like 2017, I was like, didn't want to go to therapy. It was like a little shameful. I was like, what do you mean mental health? My mind is fine. I can still do math. Like it's my emotions that are like I'm like crying all the time. Like what's happening? But just kind of rolled with it. And it was really unfortunate around 2017. The resources were not good. Like I could tell that therapy was directionally helpful, but it was like a slow drip.
Right.
So I started like I went once a week, but like it was just enough that I'm like, this is it's directionally the thing, but like I'm still kind of suffering a lot. So literally addicted to emotion books for 2 years ish. If you see my early Twitter, this is actually how I got on Twitter. It was like tweeting mostly about my own personal grief and pain
Interesting.
and like trying to sense make and get better maps of things. So also I kind of started out as a healer because I needed healing and like nobody else was gonna do it. Like it just wasn't good enough what was available.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna live a good life, I need to go full time on this. And by the time I resolve this gigantic emotional pit of unmet needs, I will be professionally qualified to heal other people.
Yeah.
And so, right, I started out reading books and then Twitter, and then just kind of met people who were increasingly better and better and better. So it started out directionally helpful, but bad still. And now I'm like, oh, there I found the methods that actually work, and it's just getting more rewarding over time, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Nice. Um, yeah.
Discovering somatic therapy and the grief community in Asheville has been like super, super helpful,
Mm,
specifically, and bodywork, of course.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question whether somebody who has like a life that they're pretty happy with, who doesn't have any obvious like crying all the time indicators that something is off, what they would get out of it. Um, yeah, for myself, the first moment where I had a very quantitative worldview and thought of myself as a robot, and then I worked at this like fairly strange hedge fund called Bridgewater that has this like transparent radical honesty feedback thing. And somebody called me out for being defensive sometime in a
Mm,
meeting in like real time. And then I was like, I don't believe you. Like I'm just being logical. And then they were like, check your heart rate, check your tone of voice. You're like speaking louder, you're speaking more quickly, you're interrupting more. And I was like, oh man, you're actually right. Like there is some kind of like change in my own way of being that I didn't notice. And I was like, this seems bad. I need to like, even if it's just for like job performance, I need to like get a handle on this. And that
mm,
was like the very first like crack in the armor or something. Um, I didn't feel sort of like sad or I didn't notice anything was wrong at the time. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
but now I'm very happy. I feel like I have lots of emotions. There's a lot to like handle and accept and deal with. And I'm glad I'm like doing all this stuff. But yeah, I don't know how to, yeah, how to get other people there.
Hmm. What I've heard from other people is like it's sort of a similar experience of like, oh, you notice a little bit of a warping in the fabric of reality. You're like, oh, I like my body is reacting, or like somebody else super logical came to me and was like, but I noticed there were some things that I just like could not say or think about. Like I had
Yeah,
like my comfort zone, but then like somebody would ask about this and I'd like deflect in any way I thought possible.
yeah,
So there are like signatures I see.
yeah. I've seen that one in myself and a couple of friends of mine too, the deflecting. Like, yeah, that one came up way more recently for me. Um,
Hmm.
but it takes like, yeah, I had to have my significant other pointed out to me many, like
Mhm.
several times before I was like, okay, you're right. Like I am like systematically avoiding talking about my family and my like
Hmm.
childhood, um, and acting like it's, when I tell stories from it that she considered mildly traumatizing, I was like had a smile on my face and was kind of making jokes about them.
Yeah. Well, this question of like, quote, how do we get people interested in emotions? I'm like, there is a very real reason for the avoidance
Yeah.
also. So I'm like going into it has given me so many gifts, but also something I've learned is like not to open something before it's time.
Mm,
But it like I guess my world model now is like we just need this or else we can't live a life that actually feels fully happy. Like it's like stuff that wants to be done, whether by us or like it will be handed down eventually. But like the
Yeah.
same way that like we need to eat every day, like the emotions need to like do their resolution thing. And it's like a little weird that we're so culturally out of touch with what the emotional equivalent of eating is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to drag anyone kicking and screaming
Mm,
into emotional awareness of like their childhood or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like I do genuinely feel the world would be way better off with more emotional awareness also.
Yeah. I'm curious, was there like a book, like any particular book that you remember being more impactful?
Mm. Yeah, well, I actually wonder if you saw it. I literally just wrote a post about like resources
Oh,
for expanding emotional space holding capacity.
oh no.
No, okay. Video note to self, I'll link that one also. But yes, there is one, and it's called The Language of Emotions by Carla
Mm,
McLaren.
mm,
Thesis is, hi, emotions are a thing, and here's a one-to-one map between each of them and like what their gifts are and
mm.
like what they're here to do. So ignoring emotions is like steering through life with blinders on, basically.
Right.
And that, so I actually carried that book around as a talisman for like a year or two. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm angry. What do I do? And like open to the anger chapter.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I'm super, super, super grateful now that I've finally connected with like a community of practitioners whose both embodied skills and mental sense making is like solid enough to be workable. Because I'm remembering this book. I'm like, man, I was in a bad place when I read that book. Oh my God, I'm sorry, past self. Um, Still love the book though. It's where I got like the trauma as initiation frame.
Mm. I don't know that one.
Yeah, so she talks about, she packs a lot into that book, and I still use the world model. So The Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren. Step one, every person has sort of a quaternity. There's the soul, the intellect, the body, and the emotions. And they all hum along together as a system. Considering a person as those four things has really unblocked my own flow of life.
Yeah.
Um, and then trauma is just sort of a thing you have to like, it's an initiation conducted at the wrong time by the wrong person in the wrong way, but it's an initiation nevertheless. Um, Meaning, you know how in IFS they're all like, "Oh, you need to like go rescue your inner child." What
Yeah.
if something so bad happened to your inner child that you can't rescue them until you've like really upskilled yourself a lot?
Yeah.
That's the like initiatory path of it.
I see.
Like, well, you're on this journey now. There's no way forward but to rescue yourself, to like get your soul back into your body. That's the other thing. Like I discovered, so what are the gifts of emotions? Meaning. Like my life feels abundantly meaningful now. Um in tech job, I would sit around being like, is there more to life? Like, is this,
Yeah.
there was a subtle sense of wrongness, and now I'm like, yo, I've given it my best shot. Like if I go before my time, like if I like die spontaneously or something, I won't have the like, oh, I wish I'd like done this differently. I'm like, I've really done my best here.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, that's a good feeling to have. Um, I think, yeah, one thing that I remember also finding really attractive that you just mentioned was like, I forgot exactly how you put it, but there's like a lot of information in your emotional state and
Mm-hmm.
in your, I guess also like your body and maybe soul. And ignoring it is, leaves you way less effective in a bunch of ways. Like this is sort of like the capitalist argument for trying to get to know yourself.
I know. Right,
But
because the question is like, well, effective at what?
right.
Um, but I think Joe Hudson, do you know Joe Hudson's work?
The name sounds familiar.
Cool. Um, he's doing a really, really interesting job bringing like what I know from my own somatic training as like coherent emotional skills that really move energy, but like making them palatable and helpful in the business world, but not in a like producey way. So my model now of like, okay, emotions give us information to help us move through life, but where are we going? I'm like, okay, there's kind of a thing that a soul wants to be like, and our job is to just like keep our soul intact and in integrity and move through life from like birth to like eldership while showing up well for us and those around us.
Mm,
Like stewarding the soul is the whole thing that takes care of like the rest of everything.
mm,
And that comes with a real sense of enoughness also. Like,
mm.
but I love that Joe Hudson engages with this. He doesn't put it in like quite those words, but he's like, hey, if you're unwilling to feel something, you are actually more easily controlled.
Right.
So emotions make you more effective, but also not feeling emotions leaves you way more vulnerable to outside influence
Yeah.
versus one of the clear gifts of feeling emotions is like your life feels like yours to the extent that we're individuals, but like your place in the cosmos and like there's an ownership of it suddenly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. It is, yeah, it's sort of like these like initial steps with an eye towards effectiveness or something are like a little distasteful depending on
Mm,
where you are now, but like they were really helpful for me as a person who wanted to be effective or whatever.
mm.
Um, Sort of like gateway thoughts or something.
Yeah, what have some of the benefits of emotions been for you, and what has you interested in spreading the word of emotions?
Yeah, I mean, so I want to just caveat that I'm obvious, like I'm not nearly as far along as I think a lot of people are. But recently I've been doing a lot of like IFS therapy, and I did like an MDMA IFS trip um in another country, and it yeah, it like I've been getting to know these like sort of parts of myself that pop up in inopportune times. Like I know that I have a somewhat anxious attachment style. That was like something I discovered, pretty early on in this journey. But now I'm actually seeing the like kind of components of it and recognizing them when they pop up in day-to-day life versus being like, yes, I know this about myself. Can
Mm,
I change that? Do I even understand when I'm doing anxious attachment actions or not? Like, not really. To now, I'm like, oh, I sense this sort of wounded inner exile who wants like connection, sort of like clawing at the
mhm,
world to get it. And I can kind of step in and spend some time with it as like a adult mentally.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, so for me, like there have been this in a very like uh sort of almost mundane level. Like there have been like behaviors that I have had that I didn't want that I can now see the components of and like kind of intercept and not do anymore. So that's been like a recent thing that's pretty huge. Um, yeah, I also realized like I don't know, a big realization for me recently was that uh I never really thought about my dad. Um, and my relationship with him that much. Like I thought about my mom and sister a lot more in my therapy. But I realized that I have like a sort of constrained self-conception of masculinity that I have been like fitting myself into in order to like uh sort of get his acceptance and also not compete with him. Um,
Hmm.
and just realizing that framework and uh it's enabled me to like feel a lot more free to make whatever kinds of choices I want to in terms of like taking up physical space and like competing with other men on things or other people on things. Like it's sort of
Hmm.
unlocked a little bit of competitive spirit, which I
Oh,
never had before. I was always like, I don't want to compete for this. Like I don't like competition. And
man. Okay, I love this. I'm hearing, right, an echo of the thing I said of like, you have like more options available to you now, and like your choices can really feel like yours and like be a good fit for actual you instead of this like autopilot thing.
yeah, for sure. There's so much conditioning that I'm like just getting glimpses into like in the past month or something that I'm like kind of getting a little bit free of. Um, yeah, it feels like becoming more myself in a way that I am
Mm.
very happy with. Yeah. Another thing that attracted me early on was realizing the brain works in a extremely like getting to know the mechanisms of the brain a little more. I read The Body Keeps the Score, and I think that was my like first gateway thing into like, wait, the brain is pretty strange, and but also like there's a sort of simple model you can have for PTSD and things like that. Um, and in particular, like EMDR, I ended up trying that with somebody, not for very long actually, but like long enough that I saw this like side to side eye movement and blinking 3 times and pendulating between like positive and negative memories, like was just like almost magical. Like I don't want to
Hmm.
sell people too hard, but it was just like, okay, there is like there are some like serious um brain hacks or something that like that are going on that are like worth investigating, basically. Like,
Totally. Yeah, I hear you talk about that and I'm like, yep, that's a somatic embodied experience of emotional resolution of like a stored charge that people can just feel better after it's resolved. And
yeah.
all it takes is like, okay, I have a tweet somewhere that's like, wait, there are real emotion physics.
Yeah.
Whenever somebody says emotions are irrational, I mentally translate that to emotions follow different rules than I would expect them to. Because the more
Right.
I've learned about this, no, there are like real things. If kids go through particular things, they will carry that for the rest of their lives in particular ways, unless they are resolved in these other particular ways. Like there are patterns to all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another like red pill or whatever to get into is just like, oh wait, there are systems here. There is a mechanism. It is
Hmm.
knowable in some sense. Um, yeah.
Right, and it's somatically knowable too. Like that's the interesting thing. Like becoming emotionally fluent is like a motor skill, like the same way that learning to walk is. So my
Yeah.
gateway was like I had to have like a full mental map of the whole thing. I read all those books before I would even dare to feel a single thing. But now uh now I'm like a feeling professional. Like I help people move through things and shed layers of tension off their bodies by like touch. And I don't need to explain anything for somebody to feel that benefiting them, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I was kind of, I mean, even now, pretty locked away out of my body in a lot of ways. Like I'm very embodied in that I like a lot of sports and
Mhm.
dance and like moving weirdly, but feeling emotions in my body and like paying attention to that has been kind of hard to access for a while. I'm only just starting to like develop the skill and
Mm.
yeah, it's a slow process for me right now.
Yeah, well, luckily, man, it's nice to be having these conversations now because I'm like, well, I can spare you some work, I guess, because I recognize that slow process from where I was about 2017 before I made a whole bunch of emotion friends.
Yeah,
Um,
how do I get to the next level? What's the work that you can spare?
yeah, I just spent a lot of time really wanting support and not finding it.
Mm,
So now I sort of have a mission, sort of, I get it's one of my creative drives where I'm like, wait, people who want to heal, like they can do it. The technology exists, like let's make it louder.
yeah,
People who want to gain emotional literacy, I don't want you to have to stumble around in the dark like I did. So now I made this post with like the best resources I know of. But I
gotcha.
really do want our cultural understanding of emotion physics to exist and accurately match reality and fit the real patterns that there are. Like, I think we could be so much happier as a culture with not that much extra effort.
I'm imagining you printing business cards that say emotional physicist on them.
I'll consider it. This is it's an interesting arc. I'm making physics art right now. This is you can see
Oh,
it.
cool. Yeah,
It's like my old notes, and my friend that I'm staying with is gonna paint on it.
nice. Oh, so it's like actual physics that will be transformed. Nice.
Yeah, it I mean, I really did spend years on it, so that informs my word choice.
Yeah,
And I still like it, but I also care about my well-being and the well-being of the people close to me.
yeah. Mm.
But yeah, I'll link you that post in Twitter DM literally right now. Um, so we have 5 more minutes before this kicks us out. I wonder, is there anything else you like wanted to say? I feel like I've met you, but I'm also happy to keep chatting and jamming.
Um,
So there's a way in which I feel complete and I'm not attached, but I'm also happy to keep going for as long as you want.
yeah, I think I have maybe one more question, which is like, um, well, this must happen in your life, right? Like you must have friends who are very quantitative and you want to help them. What are your first steps with them? Do you just do like offer to do body work
Mm.
and that's like enough? Like they don't have to do any kind of reading on their own, or do you give them a book or how's it like is your first thing to do like figure out how to pierce their worldview a little bit and get in there or
Great. Yes. The first thing I do is examine my motivation for helping them. I'm like, do you want to be helped? I mean, helped, one definition of help. What often happens is I see people who are very quantitative and I feel sad that their relationships are not as good as they could be.
yeah,
Or like, right, I'm venturing outside of my like emotional skills bubble for a little bit to do this Cambridge trip, and I'm like, y'all just seem like you're like having problems that you don't need to be having. Um, meaning meaninglessness is the big one. Like, I'm like, why are you all working on things that don't go anywhere when there are like real things that benefit real people that could use real attention?
Yeah.
But how do I help them? Right. If somebody comes to me and asks for something, then I will provide it in the best way I can. How do I help the people who aren't coming to me though? Like
Yeah,
that
let's
is,
say,
I have a temptation to do that, but I don't think they want it and I have to rein myself in. So maybe ask a more specific question.
yeah, I guess like, okay, for example, I have a good friend who um I I've like sort of taught a little bit about empathy, and he has been going wild, like using it on the dating market to great success, which I feel like is a little whatever. And but he's like repeating these patterns, and he's like starting to see them, but I think he sorry, I think he could get a little bit more in touch with what he actually like his underlying desires and feelings and break out of these patterns. And I would like as his friend, I think he would be happier if he like did this like small step. Um, but I don't know the right way to like,
Hmm.
yeah, I agree that you cannot like, make the horse drink even though you've brought it to the water or something, but I don't know
Hmm.
the best like water to bring it to.
Yeah. Okay. With that friend, that's a great case example. It really happens all the time.
Yeah.
Step one, and this actually comes more through some of my animist ecological teachings. I'm like, step one, like, be in relationship with your friend. Like, be there, be nearby, be present for what he actually is, not like something else. Um, so
Yeah.
I'm answering for me personally. I'm like, okay, if I see this person going through all these patterns where I'm like, I don't have this problem anymore because I've learned this thing. What friendship can I still have with you even if you never change? Like, show up for that. That like gets it on a like good energetic ground.
Yeah.
Or like if it's if it's like actually causing problems in our own friendship, I'd be like, that would be a conversation. I'd be like, hey, like I enjoy our friendship. I feel stressed out by like these dramatic situations you keep finding yourself in, though. Like, I don't want to talk about them. Can we do something else? Like, oh man, one of my mentors, James Mayfield Smith, he's also on Twitter, has a quote, drama is inner work asking to be done. So
Yeah.
take that for like emotion physics for a second. I'm like, oh, repeating dramatic situations. That is the signature of like, oh, we should do something here.
Yeah.
Um, but then I'd probably, as we're doing normal friend things, and like if they bring up their dating life, I'd be like, yeah, I'm noticing like this like painful thing seems to keep happening, and like I've been learning a lot about how relationships play out across populations and different people, and I'm like, this specific thing seems like it might not, like it seems resolvable. And if you're interested in talking to me more about that, I'm happy to talk about it. And then I'd like point them to someone else who teaches it because I'm not trying to. It was very tempting. One of the pitfalls of emotional work, I'm like, oh, I would love to teach it to people because it's like an intimate thing,
Yeah.
but you kind of have to feel it out with the person. Like if they don't want to learn it from you, then don't, you could just point them somewhere else. Or if they do want to learn it from you, then it's like, oh shit, well, that's actually kind of a lot of effort on my behalf, though. But like, it's nice to be able to connect with you about this.
Yeah. Mm.
So I guess the main thing I'd say is like, Hey, yeah, I'm noticing some patterns, and based on what I'm learning in my own emotional development, like these kinds of patterns are specifically resolvable in this way. If you're interested, I can send you some links.
That's
But
great. I really like what you said first, though, too, about the, yeah, I think I have a tendency to be like, oh, you could be like, you're right there. Like, what's, and then then when we have conversations, I think they're tinged with a little bit of like judgy voice accidentally
mm,
because I'm like, not in a mean way, but just, like, just read this book or just do this
right.
thing. But making space for them as they are and pretending that's forever is probably
Hmm.
a lot better of a foundation.
Cool. Yeah, I've totally had to learn that one. So you
Yeah.
might, maybe we're similar in that I was like, I have this problem. I'm gonna read all these books and like, da, 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 da. But other people just aren't like that, I guess. And
Yeah.
befriending the people that are more aligned with the thing I am doing has been my own work.
Mm. Yeah, I think in this case, we're both software engineers. He would
Mm,
read these books if he kind of like popped out of frame enough to see that it's like pattern that has like an emotional, like hidden
mm.
emotional underpinning. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I wonder. Maybe it's a like quantitative person trap also, because I'm like, oh, I've learned how to solve this problem. Now I want it to be solved everywhere in the world all at once.
yeah, like I have all these hammers. Like, where's show me all the
Mm,
nails. I can help.
yeah, but the emotional task of like, oh, loving someone and caring for them is like a
Hmm.
partnership, and it requires being attuned to what they want, not just my
What I want for
own
them. Yeah.
desire of, hey, look at this cool hammer.
Yeah, totally.
Like the, and a trust that like whatever they're bringing is real and meaningful and includes like pieces of their context that you're not seeing. So
True.
like
Yeah.
sometimes it actually is harder for them. So like the gentle proposal of like, hey, I've like learned to resolve this sort of thing. Maybe it is actually harder in their case for some reason we're not seeing.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so that's part of like scoping out like, is this a good time for them or not?
Yeah,
And maybe it will never be their medicine. I don't know.
very true. Ah, I learned a lot. This was so good.
Oh, great. What are what like what?
What did I learn?
Yeah.
I mean, this most recent thing, I'm really excited to check out the book you mentioned and the resources. Um, yeah, I want to dive into the stuff you have on somatic um presentations or whatever. I think that's my next focus area. And yeah, I think the biggest shift for me is like I should stop problem solving for my friends. Um,
Mm,
at least to the same extent. I mean, it's interesting because I've always had like kind of a problem solving relationship with a fair number of my like more quantitative friends.
hmm.
Um, yeah, so it's going to be tricky to sort of move.
Yes. No, I commend you, and my invitation. This is the only thing that has worked for me is I'm like, all that energy that I want to take to problem solve you, it goes right back to me. Like,
Yeah.
oh, what is what is my problem that I'm ignoring? Fucking fine, okay. I'll put it there. Oh, this is why they might not be listening to me. This is actually really hard, like stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that's a big takeaway for me that I'm a little like slightly embarrassed about not having
Oh,
perceived before.
yeah.
But yeah.
I mean,
Um,
it's all natural, normal, developmental phases. Like I'll just be open. I totally had that slash still sometimes do, but more when I leave my little like emotional grounding bubble, more when I like venture out.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting about the connecting with other people in the same space. Like I kind of just joined Twitter slash
Mm.
Teapot slash whatever and have been connecting more with these people in the past like month, basically. So wish me luck, I guess.
I totally do. Wow, it's only been a month. I think it'll be super fruitful for you.
Yeah, it's been fun because I feel like I had a somewhat independent path to where I am. Um, and now there's just so many more, I see so many people who had like kind of a similar path, and there's so many more like branches that I wasn't aware of. Um, yeah, so
This
exciting
is
times.
something that I actively have to like deal with. The like, oh, this thing I wasn't even looking at is like actually a whole world with like lots of pre-existing bodies of work.
Yeah.
Like body work is like that a lot. So anytime somebody asks me what I offer, I'm like, a constantly expanding frontier.
Yeah,
Yeah. But that's exciting. Keep me posted.
will do. Yeah. I'm
And
sad you're not
yeah,
going to VAG camp.
let me stop the recording.